Shaquille O'Neal stood at 7 feet 1 inch tall, weighed 300 pounds at the age of 20, and was, by almost every measurable standard, the most physically dominant human being to ever play professional basketball. And yet by the time he reached his 50s, he was sleeping with a machine strapped to his face just to keep himself breathing through the night. That is where this story begins. Not at the trophy ceremony. Not at the record-breaking dunk. It begins at the quiet, mechanical hiss of a CPAP device in a vast, empty estate, a sound that said, plainly and without sentimentality, that the body keeping score eventually presents its bill. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972, in Newark, New Jersey. His biological father, Joe Tony, was gone early. Absent. Which means that from the very beginning, Shaq understood something that fame would later obscure, that the people who are supposed to be there for you sometimes simply are not. His mother, Lucille, raised him inside poverty and uncertainty, and she did it with a determination that her son would later describe as the most underrated force in his life. But the figure who would shape him most directly, the man who would pour discipline into him like concrete, was Army Sergeant Philip Harrison, his stepfather. Philip Harrison did not raise Shaq gently. He raised him the way men shaped by military structure raise sons in dangerous environments, with rigid control, physical training, and an emotional language so compressed it bordered on silence. The family relocated to Germany. The household operated on a schedule. Softness was not tolerated. And Shaq, already physically enormous, already alienated by a body that bus drivers refused to believe belonged to a child, found his one place of refuge inside a basketball court, where his size was not a liability but a weapon. That is not an accident of biography. That is the blueprint. A boy who was abandoned by one father, disciplined without warmth by another, and physically separated from everyone his own age by a body that announced him before he could speak. That boy does not grow up with an uncomplicated relationship to power. He grows up desperately needing to prove that his size means something. That it is worth something. That he is worth something. The basketball court gave him the answer he was looking for. Every broken rim was a sentence he got to finish. By the time he reached 14 years old, Shaq stood 6 feet 8 inches tall and wore a size 17 shoe. He was, in every physical sense, already a man inside a boy's life. His stepfather handed him a basketball not as encouragement but as direction. Cold courts in Germany. Hours until his hands went numb. The discipline was punishing. But punishing discipline, when applied to raw, extraordinary talent, tends to produce something singular. And in 1992, the NBA found out exactly what that was. The Orlando Magic selected him with the first overall pick in the draft. He arrived at 300 pounds, 7 feet 1 inch, 20 years old. And within his first game, he broke a backboard. Not metaphorically. Literally. The infrastructure of a professional arena was not built to contain what he was. The NBA, quietly and with some embarrassment, had to redesign its equipment standards. That is the kind of entrance that does not happen twice in a generation. The platinum rap albums came. The Hollywood films came. The endorsements, the catchphrases, the globally recognizable persona, all of it came. But beneath the noise, Shaq was carrying something the cameras never captured cleanly, the persistent, gnawing ache of a man who needed to be seen as more than a body. He needed to be seen as the best. Not one of the best. The best. And that need, which was born in Newark and sharpened in Germany and confirmed every time a defender bounced off him like a car hitting a wall, is what made his partnership with Kobe Bryant both the greatest and the most combustible arrangement in the history of the sport. Kobe Bryant arrived in Los Angeles in 1996 as a teenager with a cold stare and an appetite for competition that matched Shaq's own in a completely different register. Where Shaq dominated through force, Kobe dominated through obsession. They were not similar people. They were, in some fundamental way, mirror images. Each one's greatest strength was the other one's most uncomfortable reminder of what he was not. And for a while, that tension was fuel. 3 consecutive championships. 2000, 2001, 2002. Shaq collected finals MVP honors in all 3. He was averaging numbers that made analysts reach for comparisons and find none. His combination of power and movement, the unexpected quickness inside that frame, rendered opponents not just defeated but genuinely helpless. The Los Angeles Lakers did not merely win during those years. They imposed. But the locker room was freezing. Quietly, persistently, without press conferences to announce it, the relationship between the two men curdled. Two dominant personalities in a closed system will eventually compete for more than playing time. They compete for narrative, for legacy, for the right to be remembered as the reason it worked. And when Shaq was traded to the Miami Heat in 2004, when the franchise made its calculation that youth was the better investment, he packed up a decade of glory and left Los Angeles with something that had not been there when he arrived: the knowledge that the institution you helped build will eventually choose someone else. He won another championship in Miami in 2006. He performed creditably for 5 more years before retiring in 2011. The career totals were staggering: nearly 29,000 points, 4 championship rings, 3 Finals MVP awards, 1 regular season MVP, 15 All-Star selections. By any accounting, the case is closed. He is among the greatest ever to play the game. But the paper trail of a career tells you what happened. It does not tell you what it cost. His marriage to Shawnee O'Neal produced 6 children. Including a blended family he was determined to build into something different from what he had experienced. He was, by his own admission, a man who wanted to be the father that wasn't there for him. And he was also, by Shawnee's later account, a man who was frequently not there, present in body, absent in the way that matters. She would later describe him as a flickering ghost inside his own home. That phrase is precise, and it lands entirely on its own. The marriage ended in 2011. Shawnee was granted primary custody of the children. For a man whose deepest wound was abandonment, who had organized his entire psychology around never being the one who left, this outcome carried a specific weight that a championship ring cannot counterbalance. And then, in 2018, his son Shaquille was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Shaquille O'Neal, the man who broke backboards, who signed a $121 million contract, who stood in arenas while tens of thousands of people chanted his name, found himself in a hospital hallway, unable to impose his will on anything. That is a different kind of confrontation. There is no technique for it. There is no conditioning program that prepares you. You simply stand there and discover what you are made of when size means nothing. That same year, 2018, Shaq sat across from Kobe Bryant in an interview, and for the first time in years the two men spoke to each other like people who had shared something irreplaceable. There was warmth. There was humor. There was the particular ease that only exists between two people who understand each other's depths because they spent years trying to outrun each other. It was a reconciliation, fragile and real. On January 26, 2020, Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash in Calabasas, California, along with his daughter Gianna and 7 others. He was 41 years old. Shaquille O'Neal delivered the memorial address at Staples Center, the arena where they had won 3 championships together, the arena where the rivalry and the brotherhood had both been born. He stood at the podium and his voice broke. The man who had spent a lifetime projecting invincibility stood before the world and wept for his little brother. The room that had once erupted for him now held him in something quieter. Grief does not perform. It simply arrives. And after the grief came the quiet. By the time of his retirement, and accelerating significantly afterward, Shaq's weight climbed past 400 pounds. His hips bore the accumulated damage of 19 years of high-impact collisions. His lower back and knees carried that same history. His cardiovascular system was strained in ways that did not announce themselves publicly but were present, measurable, and serious. And then came the diagnosis that revealed the full picture: severe sleep apnea, causing him to stop breathing more than 100 times each night. 100 times. Each night. The man who had dominated every room he entered, whose very breathing once seemed to shake the air around him, could no longer be trusted to breathe while unconscious. The CPAP machine became part of his nightly routine, a plastic mask, a mechanical hiss, the mundane apparatus of survival. He lost more than 55 pounds over the following years. Not for headlines. Not for an endorsement. According to his own account, he did it because his children asked him to take care of himself. That is the version of Shaquille O'Neal that does not appear in the highlight reels. The man sitting across from his kids, hearing them say they needed him to stay, and deciding that was reason enough. The rehabilitation was slow, painful, marked by the specific frustration of a man accustomed to mastering his body discovering that his body now had conditions of its own. Each step forward was not a triumph. It was a negotiation. It was the work of someone who has accepted that the terms have changed. He is rebuilding the relationships with his children that distance and absence and pride once strained. He is present in a way that his career, for all its glory, made intermittently impossible. He is doing the quiet, unglamorous work of becoming the person he always said he wanted to be. And here is what that reveals. When you trace the full arc, the boy who was abandoned became a man who feared abandonment so deeply that he poured everything into achievement, into being so dominant, so essential, so impossible to ignore, that no one could ever justify leaving. And then life, patient and indifferent, took people anyway. Took his marriage. Took his physical invincibility. Took Kobe. And left him with the one thing that was always actually his, the choice of who to become in silence. The man who seemed unbeatable was always fighting something you couldn't see from the stands. And the man who seemed to lose the most, the marriage, the health, the brother, turned out to be the one still standing, still present, still breathing. Deliberately. One night at a time. Does physical dominance extract a psychological cost that no amount of fame or fortune can offset? And did Shaquille O'Neal spend decades achieving the wrong kind of invincibility? And is the quieter version of his life, the one with the CPAP machine and the hospital hallways and the rebuilt relationships, actually the more honest expression of who he has always been? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. For more interesting stories like this, be sure to click on the next video that pops up on your screen. You never know what you'll discover next.